I stood frozen at the back of the church, unable to breathe, as my husband of 18 years slid a wedding ring onto another woman's finger. Just 3 weeks earlier, Samuel had kissed me goodbye at our home in Lagos, claiming he was flying to Accra for an emergency business trip. Now here he was, 300 kilometers away in a small town outside Ibadan, exchanging vows with a woman who looked young enough to be our daughter. My phone slipped from my trembling hands, the camera still recording as the pastor pronounced them husband and wife. The same pastor who had blessed our marriage nearly 2 decades ago now blessed Samuel's union to a stranger while I watched, an uninvited ghost at my own husband's second wedding. For 18 years, I had built a life with this man, bore him 3 children, and supported his business with $15 million from my inheritance. And in return, he disappeared for 3 weeks only to reappear as someone else's groom. If you think this is shocking, wait until you hear what happened next. Before Samuel vanished, our life seemed perfect, at least from the outside. I'm Amara, 43 years old, a respected pediatrician at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. I come from a good family. My late father was a judge, and my mother taught literature at the university before retiring. I met Samuel during my final year of medical school. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed genuinely devoted to building a future together. After our wedding, we settled into a beautiful 4-bedroom home in Victoria Island, one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in Lagos. Our 3 children, Chidi, 16, Neka, 14, and Kachi, 11, attended private international schools. Samuel ran an import-export business specializing in electronics, which had grown steadily over the years. Every Sunday we attended church together, where Samuel served as a deacon and I volunteered with the Women's Fellowship. I always prided myself on being both a successful doctor and a dedicated wife and mother. I woke up at 5 a.m. to prepare breakfast before heading to the hospital. I made sure to be home by 6 p.m. to supervise homework and prepare dinner. Weekends were for family outings, visiting friends, or hosting dinner parties at our home. Samuel and I had what I thought was a solid marriage. We rarely argued, made major decisions together, and still went on date nights every other week. On our last anniversary, he surprised me with a diamond necklace worth $2.5 million and a romantic dinner at the rooftop restaurant where he had proposed. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Amara," he had said, raising his champagne glass. "Here's to 18 more years of happiness." I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? Samuel had always been a devoted husband and father. He called multiple times a day when traveling for business, never missed a school event, and consulted me on all major financial decisions. Or so I thought. The week before he disappeared, Samuel seemed slightly distracted, but not unusually so. His business had been facing some challenges due to new import regulations, and he mentioned needing to secure new suppliers. I assumed this was the source of his preoccupation. "Don't worry, my love," I told him one evening as we prepared for bed. "You've overcome bigger obstacles before. This too shall pass." He smiled and kissed me on the forehead. "What would I do without your unwavering support, Amara?" Little did I know that those ordinary days of domesticity were about to shatter into a nightmare. That would upend everything I thought. I knew about my husband and our marriage. The first signs of trouble appeared so subtly that I dismissed them. 3 months before his disappearance, Samuel started changing his passwords on his phone and laptop. When I casually mentioned it, he said it was a new company policy for cybersecurity. "You know how these data breaches are becoming common," he explained while avoiding eye contact. The IT consultant insisted everyone update their passwords monthly. Then came the unusual working hours. Samuel, who typically left home at 8 a.m. and returned by 7 p.m., began leaving earlier and coming home well past midnight. Twice a week turned into 4 times, then almost every day. "The new contracts from China require me to be on late-night calls," he said. "Different time zones, you understand." I did understand. International business required flexibility, but something felt off about his explanations. They were too rehearsed, too smooth. Next, I noticed the changes in his appearance. Samuel bought an entire new wardrobe, lost 10 kilograms in 2 months, and even started using expensive cologne, one I hadn't purchased for him. When I complimented the scent, he mumbled something about a free sample at the mall. 2 weeks before he vanished, I found a receipt for a hotel in Ibadan in his jacket pocket while doing laundry. The date was from a Tuesday when he had claimed to be at a business dinner in Lagos. "Samuel," I confronted him that evening. "Why were you at the Continental Hotel in Ibadan last week?" "I thought your meeting was at Radisson Blu here in Victoria Island." His reaction was immediate and defensive. "Are you going through my pockets now? What happened to trust, Amara?" "I was doing laundry," I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. "The receipt fell out." He sighed, his expression softening into the charming smile I'd fallen for all those years ago. "I'm sorry for overreacting. The meeting location changed last minute. A potential investor preferred to meet halfway between Lagos and his hometown. I forgot to mention it." It was a reasonable explanation, and Samuel delivered it with such sincerity that I pushed aside my doubts. After 18 years of marriage, didn't he deserve the benefit of the doubt? But that night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake watching Samuel, wondering why. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like I was living with a stranger. The next morning, I called my closest friend, Folek, who had been my confidant since university. Am I being paranoid? I asked her after explaining my concerns. New clothes, late nights, unexplained hotel stays? "Amara, these are classic signs," Folek said. "You need to pay attention. Men don't just change their habits for no reason." "But Samuel? He's been faithful for 18 years. Why would he start cheating now? Midlife crisis? New opportunity? Who knows why men do what they do?" Folek sighed. "Just keep your eyes open, that's all I'm saying." I decided to do exactly that. For the next week, I paid closer attention to Samuel's behavior, noting inconsistencies in his stories and the increasing frequency of business dinners. But I still had no concrete evidence of infidelity, just a growing unease. Then, just 3 days before he disappeared, I overheard part of a phone conversation as Samuel spoke in hushed tones on our balcony. "Everything is arranged. Yes, 3 weeks should be enough time. Don't worry about that. She doesn't suspect anything." When he noticed me standing at the door, he quickly ended the call. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just Kofi from Ghana. We're finalizing that deal I told you about." But he hadn't told me about any deal with someone named Kofi. And why would he say I didn't suspect anything if it was just business? I smiled and pretended to believe him, but inside, something had shifted. The cracks in our perfect life were becoming too wide to ignore. It was a Tuesday morning when Samuel disappeared. The day started normally, breakfast with the children, last-minute homework checks, and Samuel kissing me goodbye at the door. "I just got a call from our supplier in Accra," he said, his suitcase already in hand. "There's been a problem with the shipment. I need to fly out immediately. Today? But you didn't mention any trip yesterday," I said, surprised by the sudden announcement. "It just came up. Emergency situation." He kissed me quickly. "I'll call when I land." Before I could ask more questions, he was gone, the sound of his car fading as he drove away. That was the last time I saw Samuel as my husband. He did call that evening, telling me he had arrived safely in Accra and would be staying at his usual hotel. He called again the next day with updates about his meetings. By the third day, the calls became shorter, with vague explanations about poor network connections. By the end of the first week, he was only sending text messages, usually late at night. "Missing you and the kids. Situation more complicated than expected. Might need to stay longer." I tried calling, but most of my calls went straight to voicemail. When he did answer, the conversations were rushed, with Samuel claiming he was heading into meetings or that the connection was bad. 10 days into his business trip, I decided to call his office, only to discover something shocking. "Mr. Okafor? He's not scheduled for any business trips this month," his assistant told me. In fact, he told us he was taking personal leave for 3 weeks. "Family emergency," he said. My heart pounded as I hung up the phone. Samuel had lied about the purpose of his trip, but why? I immediately tried calling him again, but his phone was off. I sent messages that showed as delivered but remained unread. By the evening, I was frantic with worry and confusion. The next day, I called the hotel in Accra where Samuel claimed to be staying. "I'm sorry, but we have no guest registered under that name," the receptionist informed me. Panic set in. Had something happened to him? Was he in danger, or was this connected to his strange behavior over the past months? I called his brother Joseph, who lived in Abuja. "Joseph, I can't reach Samuel. He told me he was in Accra for business, but his office says he's on personal leave and the hotel has no record of him. There was a pause before Joseph responded. Amara, I think you should sit down. What is it? Do you know where he is? My voice trembled. I received an invitation last week. I assumed you knew. I thought maybe you were having problems and decided not to attend. Invitation to what, Joseph? Samuel's wedding. It's scheduled for this Saturday in Ibadan. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor as the room spun around me. Samuel's wedding? But he was already married to me. After regaining my composure, I picked up the phone. That's impossible. There must be some mistake. I wish there was, Amara. The invitation is right here on my desk. Samuel Okafor and Blessing Adeyemi cordially invite you to celebrate their union. It has his picture, Amara. But we're still married. We have 3 children. How can he be getting married? I don't know. I called him after I received it, but he didn't pick up. I assumed you were separated and hadn't told the family yet. I hung up in a daze, my mind refusing to process what I had just learned. My husband of 18 years wasn't missing. He was preparing to marry another woman while still legally married to me. That night, after putting the children to bed with a manufactured story about their father extending his business trip, I sat alone in our bedroom surrounded by wedding photos and family albums. 18 years of memories, of building a life together, and Samuel had discarded it all for someone named Blessing Adeyemi. The next morning, I made a decision. I would go to Ibadan and see this wedding for myself. But first, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I hired a private investigator who promised quick results for an extra fee. Within 24 hours, he had information that shattered what remained of my world. Blessing Adeyemi, age 26, works as a flight attendant for Air Nigeria. She and Mr. Okafor have been seeing each other for approximately 2 years. They purchased a house together in Lekki 6 months ago, registered under her name. The wedding is scheduled for Saturday at New Covenant Church in Ibadan, followed by a reception at Golden Tulip Hotel. 2 years. While I was running our home, raising our children, and supporting his business, Samuel had been building a parallel life with another woman. The betrayal was so enormous I couldn't even cry. I felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out my insides and left nothing but an empty shell. What about their legal status? Does he have a divorce I don't know about? I asked the investigator. No divorce proceedings have been filed. According to all records, you are still legally married. That was all I needed to know. Samuel wasn't just a cheater. He was about to commit bigamy, and I had the power to stop it. 3 days later, I found myself driving to Ibadan, dressed in my best outfit, with Folaka beside me for moral support, and my phone fully charged to record whatever happened next. I wasn't sure what I would do when I arrived at the church, but I knew I couldn't let Samuel start a new life based on lies without confronting him. Are you sure about this, Amara? Folak asked as we neared Ibadan. We could just gather evidence and take it to a lawyer instead. I need to see it with my own eyes, Foleke. I need to look him in the face when he realizes his perfect plan has failed. As we pulled up to the church, I saw guests arriving in their colorful attire, congratulating each other and taking photos. No one recognized me. Samuel's family from his hometown had only met me a few times, and he had kept his Lagos and Ibadan lives completely separate. We slipped into the back of the church, just as the ceremony was beginning. And that's when I saw him, Samuel, my husband, standing at the altar in a crisp white agbada, beaming with joy as his bride walked down the aisle. The moment I saw Samuel standing at the altar, time seemed to stop. Folake gripped my arm tightly, either to support me or to prevent me from causing a scene. Probably both. Should we leave? She whispered. No, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. I need to document everything. I pulled out my phone and began recording. The bride, Blessing, was stunningly beautiful, tall and slender with flawless skin, wearing an elaborate white lace gown that probably cost more than what Samuel claimed to make in a month. She couldn't have been more than 26 years old, practically a child compared to my 43 years. As they exchanged vows, I felt physically ill. The same promises Samuel had made to me 18 years ago, he was now making to another woman. The same tender expression he wore in our wedding photos was now directed at Blessing. It was like watching an actor perform a familiar play with a different co-star. When the pastor asked if anyone knew of any reason why they should not be joined in matrimony, Polik looked at me expectantly. "Not yet," I whispered. "I need more evidence first." Instead of interrupting the ceremony, I continued recording, capturing Samuel's face clearly as he said, "I do," and slipped a wedding ring onto Blessing's finger. I took photos of the wedding program, which listed his full name, Samuel Chukwuemeka Okafor, removing any doubt that this could be a case of mistaken identity. After the ceremony, we followed the wedding party to the reception at Golden Tulip Hotel. We stayed at a distance, but I continued taking photos. Samuel cutting the cake with Blessing, dancing with her, receiving congratulations from guests. "There's Joseph," I said, spotting Samuel's brother among the guests. He sees me. Joseph's face drained of color when our eyes met across the room. He quickly excused himself from his conversation and made his way toward us. "Amara, what are you doing here?" he asked nervously. "Attending my husband's wedding," I replied coldly. "Interesting that you decided to come after all." Joseph looked ashamed. I wanted to see if it was really happening. "I plan to tell you everything afterward." "How considerate," I said. "Who else knows about this? Who else in the family has been lying to my face for years?" "Not years," Joseph protested weakly. "Most of us only received invitations a month ago. We were shocked, but Samuel told everyone you two had divorced quietly last year." Another lie to add to the growing list. "Has anyone mentioned me here? Do they know Samuel already has a wife and 3 children in Lagos?" Joseph shook his head. "He's introduced Blessing's family to some of us, but there's been no mention of you or the children. He's presenting himself as a bachelor who finally found the right woman." The audacity was breathtaking. How had Samuel managed to compartmentalize his life so completely? How had he looked into my eyes day after day while building this elaborate deception? "Does Blessing know about me?" I asked. "I don't think so," Joseph replied. "From the way she talks about their relationship, I believe she thinks she's his first wife." First wife. The phrase burned like acid. I wasn't his first wife. I was his only legal wife. "This entire ceremony was a sham. I need to know everything, Joseph," I said firmly. "How long have you known about Blessing? What else has Samuel been hiding?" Joseph led us to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, away from the reception. What he revealed next opened a whole new dimension to Samuel's betrayal. About 2 years ago, Samuel came to me for a loan. He said the business was struggling due to some import issues. I lent him $5 million. "His business was doing fine 2 years ago," I interrupted. "We even expanded to a new office." Joseph looked surprised. "That's not what he told me. He said he was on the verge of bankruptcy." "What else?" 6 months ago, he approached me again. This time, he needed $10 million for a property investment that would solve all his problems. He promised to repay me within a year with 20% interest. I did the math quickly. "So he owes you $15 million total? Plus interest, yes. I haven't received any repayments yet. He keeps saying the investment is still maturing." I thought of the new house the investigator had mentioned, the one purchased in Blessing's name 6 months ago. The timing matched perfectly. "I think I know where your money went, Joseph. It's in a house in Lekki." Over the next hour, Joseph introduced me to other family members who had similarly been approached by Samuel for business loans or investment opportunities. His younger sister had contributed $3 million from her savings. An uncle had invested $7 million in a phantom import deal. Even his elderly mother had given him $2 million from her retirement fund. All told, Samuel had extracted over $30 million from his family members in the past 2 years, all while our family lived comfortably, but not extravagantly, and while he claimed his business was doing well but not exceptionally so. Where did all this money go? I wondered aloud. Even with the house in Lekki, there should be millions left over. "Perhaps we should look more closely at the lovely bride," Folek suggested, nodding toward the reception hall where Blessing was laughing with her friends, showing off her enormous diamond ring. As we gathered information, I also collected contact details from Samuel's family members. Many were horrified to learn about the double life he had been leading and promised to support me however they could. By the end of the reception, I had a clearer picture of Samuel's deception, but many questions remained unanswered. How had he sustained this double life for so long? Where was the money really going? And most importantly, what was I going to do with this information? As the celebration wound down and guests began to leave, I stood at the edge of the parking lot, watching as Samuel and Blessing emerged from the hotel, showered with flower petals and well wishes. They looked blissfully happy as they climbed into a decorated car, a new Mercedes I had never seen before. "Let's follow them," I told Folake. "Are you sure?" "Haven't we seen enough?" "Not nearly enough," I replied, my voice hardening with resolve. "This is just the beginning." For the next week, I lived a double life of my own. During the day, I maintained a normal routine for the children's sake, going to work, supervising homework, preparing meals. I told them their father had extended his trip due to business complications. "But he missed my football match," Chidi complained. "He promised he would be back." "I know, sweetheart," I said, hugging my son. Sometimes adult responsibilities get complicated. If only they knew just how complicated their father's life truly was. At night, after the children were asleep, I dove into my investigation. Folak had followed Samuel and Blessing to a luxury resort outside Ibadan, where they were apparently spending their honeymoon. Meanwhile, I began meticulously documenting Samuel's financial activities. First, I gathered our bank statements for the past 3 years. Samuel and I maintained 3 accounts: a joint account for household expenses, his business account, where I was a signatory, and my personal account. The joint account showed regular withdrawals that matched our usual expenses, but I noticed increasingly large transfers from this account to his business account over the past 2 years. The business account was where things got interesting. Samuel had been making large cash withdrawals, N$500,000 here, N$700,000 there, all labeled vaguely as supplier payments or operational costs. Together, these withdrawals totaled nearly N$15 million over 2 years. I also discovered transfers to an account I didn't recognize, regular monthly payments of N$350,000 for the past 18 months. When I called the bank to inquire about this account, they confirmed it belonged to Blessing Adeyemi. "So he's been paying her N$350,000 every month," I told Folake when she returned from Ibadan. "That's more than most executives make, and she already has a job as a flight attendant." "Sugar daddy arrangement," Folake said bluntly. Classic case. But something still didn't add up. Even with the house, the monthly payments to Blessing, and the lavish wedding, there was still money unaccounted for. Next, I turned to his business records. As a doctor, I had limited knowledge of import-export operations, but I knew enough to recognize discrepancies. The company's official financial statements showed modest but consistent profits, matching what Samuel had always told me. But when I compared these with the bank statements and tax filings, I found alarming inconsistencies. The business appeared to be conducting far more transactions than were being officially reported. There were payments from companies I'd never heard Samuel mention, and transfers to offshore accounts in Dubai and Singapore. "I think he's been running 2 sets of books," I told Folake. "One for the tax authorities and family consumption, and another reflecting the actual business." "Is he laundering money?" Folake asked, alarmed. "I don't know, but I need to find out what's really happening with his business." I hired a forensic accountant recommended by a colleague at the hospital. The accountant, Mrs. Adigwe, reviewed the documents I had gathered and confirmed my suspicions. "Your husband has been systematically diverting funds from his legitimate business to these offshore accounts," she explained. "Based on what I'm seeing, the actual revenue of his company is approximately 3 times what's being reported. But why hide it? We're married. We share everything." Mrs. Adigwe gave me a sympathetic look. "Mrs. Okafor, in my experience, when someone goes to such lengths to hide assets, it's usually because they're planning to use those assets in ways their spouse wouldn't approve of, or they're preparing for a future where the spouse has no claim to those assets. In other words, Samuel had been preparing for a life without me for years, squirreling away money where I couldn't reach it. The deeper I dug, the more overwhelming the evidence became. Samuel wasn't just a cheater and a bigamist. He was a sophisticated financial fraudster who had been systematically siphoning money from his business, borrowing from family members with no intention of repaying them, and creating a lavish lifestyle for his young girlfriend while maintaining the facade of a modest, responsible provider at home. 9 days after the wedding, while I was still processing these revelations, Samuel called home as if nothing was unusual. "Hello, my love," he said cheerfully. "Sorry I haven't called much. The network here has been terrible." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Where exactly is here, Samuel?" "Accra, of course. Where else would I be?" The casual way he continued his lies made my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm. If he knew what I had discovered, he might take actions to hide even more evidence. "The children miss you," I said, trying to sound normal. "When are you coming home?" "Soon, I promise. Maybe another week or so. These negotiations are taking longer than expected." "I understand. These things happen when you're building a new life." There was a slight pause before Samuel responded. "Exactly. Business can be unpredictable. Is there anything else you want to tell me, Samuel? Anything important that might affect our family?" Another pause, longer this time. "No, nothing I can think of." "Why do you ask?" "Just checking. We haven't talked properly in weeks. I thought there might be developments I should know about." "Everything is fine, Amara. I'll tell you all about the deal when I get home." After we hung up, I sat trembling with rage and disbelief. Even now, caught in a web of his own making, Samuel was doubling down on his deception. Did he really think he could marry another woman and then return to our home as if nothing had changed? What was his plan, to maintain two separate families indefinitely? The next day, I received a call from Joseph. "Amara, I've been asking around. It seems Samuel has been telling different stories to different people for years. To some family members, he claimed his business was struggling. To others, he boasted about expansion plans. No one has the complete picture except Samuel himself." "And Blessing?" I asked. "What do we know about her?" My wife spoke with one of her bridesmaids at the wedding. "Apparently, Blessing believes Samuel is a wealthy businessman who owns import companies in 3 countries. She thinks the house in Lekki is just one of several properties he owns." So Blessing, too, had been fed a carefully crafted narrative, one that painted Samuel as far more successful and affluent than he actually was. Was she a victim of his deception like the rest of us, or a willing participant? 2 days later, Folake called with news. Samuel and Blessing checked out of the resort yesterday. I followed them to the house in Lekki. They appear to be settling in there. "So he's not planning to come home at all," I said, the realization hitting me hard despite all I had already discovered. "It doesn't look that way." "What are you going to do now, Amara?" It was time to make some difficult decisions. Samuel would be returning to Lagos, not to our home, but to his new house with his new wife. He would be within reach, but still maintaining the fiction of being in Ghana for business. "I'm going to confront him," I said. "But first, I need to protect myself and the children." I made appointments with 2 people the next day, a lawyer specializing in divorce and financial crimes, and a locksmith. It was time to secure both my legal position and my physical home from the man who had betrayed us all. The day I decided to confront Samuel was exactly 2 weeks after his wedding. He still believed I was in the dark about his double life, still expecting to control the narrative on his own terms. That morning, I met with my lawyer, Mrs. Bankole, a formidable woman in her 50s with a reputation for handling high-profile divorce cases. "Based on the evidence you've provided, we have a strong case not just for divorce but for criminal charges," she explained. "Bigamy is punishable by up to 7 years imprisonment under Nigerian law. The financial fraud could result in additional penalties. I don't necessarily want Samuel in prison," I admitted. "I want justice and financial security for my children." "Then we focus on the divorce and financial settlement." Mrs. Bankole nodded. "Given the circumstances, we can petition for full custody of the children and a substantial portion of all assets, including those he's attempted to hide." She helped me draft an emergency court order freezing the joint account and Samuel's business accounts pending investigation. By noon, the orders had been signed by a sympathetic judge and delivered to the banks. "What about the house in Lekki?" I asked. "It's in Blessing's name." "We can contest that as well, arguing it was purchased with marital assets. It won't be straightforward, but given the timing and your evidence about the source of funds, we have a reasonable chance." Next, I met with the school principals for each of my children, explaining that their father was to have no access to them until further notice due to a sensitive family situation. I didn't share the full details, but emphasized that it was for their protection. With the legal and logistical preparations in place, I was ready for the confrontation. The private investigator had confirmed that Samuel was currently at his office in Victoria Island, his first day back at work since the wedding. He had told his staff he'd been in Ghana closing an important deal. I dressed carefully for the meeting, a tailored navy suit that projected authority, subtle makeup, and the diamond earrings Samuel had given me on our 15th anniversary. This wasn't just about emotional confrontation, it was a power move. As I drove to his office, I called Folaki one last time. "Everything is set," she assured me. "Blessing is currently at work. Her flight leaves in an hour and she'll be gone overnight. The locksmith has changed all the locks at your house. Your mother is with the children. I'll be waiting nearby if you need me." Samuel's office occupied the top floor of a modern building in Victoria Island's business district. His company, Okafor Imports Limited, employed 15 people, all of whom knew me as the boss's wife. The receptionist looked surprised to see me. "Dr. Okafor, we didn't expect you today. Mr. Okafor is in a meeting, but it's all right, Ngozi," I said with a calm smile. "This is an urgent family matter. I'm sure he'll want to see me." Before she could respond, I walked past her desk toward Samuel's private office at the end of the corridor. I could hear voices inside. Samuel and 2 other men engaged in what sounded like a business negotiation. I knocked once and opened the door without waiting for a response. Samuel's face when he saw me was a study in shock and terror. He had been leaning back in his chair, laughing at something one of his visitors had said. At the sight of me, he froze mid-laugh, his eyes widening with panic. "Amara, what a wonderful surprise." The 2 men turned to look at me, curious about the person who had caused such a dramatic shift in their host's demeanor. "Gentlemen," I said pleasantly, "I apologize for the interruption, but I need to speak with my husband privately. It's an urgent family matter." Samuel stood quickly, his business smile firmly in place, though I could see beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Of course, Mr. Adesina, Mr. Kuti, shall we continue this tomorrow? Same time?" After awkward handshakes and curious glances, the men departed, leaving Samuel and me alone in his office. As soon as the door closed, his facade crumbled. "Amara, I can explain." "Explain what, Samuel? That you're still in Ghana on business? Or that you married another woman 2 weeks ago in Ibadan?" The color drained from his face. How did I find out that my husband of 18 years is a bigamist? That he's been systematically stealing from his family and business? That he purchased a house in Lekki for his 26-year-old girlfriend, using money borrowed from his relatives under false pretenses? Samuel sank back into his chair, his legs apparently unable to support him any longer. "It's not what you think," he began weakly. "Then enlighten me, Samuel. What exactly is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been living a double life for years, lying to everyone around you, me, our children, your family, even your new wife." I placed the wedding photos I had printed on his desk. Samuel stared at them as if they might explode. "You were there?" he whispered. "I watched you marry her. I recorded the entire ceremony. I spoke with your family members afterward, the same ones. You've been borrowing money from Weil, claiming your business was failing." Samuel's eyes darted around the room as if looking for escape. "Roots. The offshore accounts in Dubai and Singapore," I continued. "The second set of books for your business. The monthly transfers to Blessing for the past 18 months. Did you really think no one would ever connect the dots?" "How did you find all this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Does it matter? What matters is that it's over, Samuel. Your elaborate house of cards has collapsed." For a moment, he seemed to deflate entirely. Then, as I had seen him do countless times in business negotiations, he shifted strategies. "Amara, listen to me. I made mistakes, serious mistakes, but we can work this out. It was never my intention to hurt you." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. "Never your intention? You married another woman, Samuel. You stood before God and our pastor and vowed to love and cherish her till death do you part. Those same vows you made to me 18 years ago. How exactly was that not intended to hurt me?" "It's complicated," he said, reaching for my hand across the desk. I pulled back as if his touch might burn me. "No, it's actually quite simple. You're a bigamist and a thief. You've stolen from me, from your family, from your business partners, and now you've stolen another woman's future by trapping her in an illegal marriage. Blessing isn't trapped. Samuel protested. She loves me. Does she love you, or the wealthy international businessman you've pretended to be? Does she know your business is leveraged to the hilt? That the money you've been lavishing on her was borrowed or diverted from your legitimate business? His expression hardened. You don't understand what blessing means to me. Oh, I understand perfectly. She's young and beautiful. She makes you feel important and successful. She doesn't challenge you or have expectations based on 18 years of shared history. Samuel stood abruptly, his initial shock giving way to anger. You've always been so judgmental, Amara. So perfect, so superior with your medical degree and your family connections. Do you have any idea what it's like living in your shadow? Always having to live up to Dr. Amara's standards? I was momentarily stunned by this unexpected attack. My standards? To expect fidelity in marriage? To assume my husband wasn't stealing from his family? Those aren't high standards, Samuel. They're the bare minimum. You never understood the pressure I was under, he continued, pacing behind his desk. The business hasn't been doing well for years. I had to keep up appearances, maintain our lifestyle. By committing fraud? By borrowing money from your elderly mother? By marrying a second wife? Blessing believed in me when I was at my lowest, Samuel insisted. She didn't judge me or question my decisions. She supported me unconditionally. She didn't question you because you lied to her. You created a fictional version of yourself that doesn't exist. Samuel's face twisted with resentment. At least with her I feel like a man, not some subordinate always seeking approval. The cruelty of his words sliced through me. All these years I had believed we were partners, equals building a life together. Now I was hearing that my success had somehow emasculated him, driven him to this elaborate deception. And what about our children? I asked quietly. What does Blessing think about them? Samuel looked away. She knows I have children. She's willing to accept them. How generous of her, I said sarcastically. And what was your plan exactly? To divide your time between two households? To maintain two separate lives indefinitely? I was going to tell you, he claimed. After I sorted out the financial situation, I was going to propose an amicable separation, a dignified divorce. How thoughtful. And in the meantime, you commit bigamy, which is a criminal offense. Samuel's expression shifted again, this time to something calculating. No one needs to know about that. We can handle this privately, like adults. It's too late for that. The bank accounts are already frozen. His face went pale. What did you do? What I had to do to protect myself and our children. Emergency court orders freezing all joint assets and your business accounts pending investigation. Oh, and I've changed the locks at home. Samuel slammed his fist on the desk. You had no right. I had every right. I'm your legal wife, the mother of your children, and a signatory on those accounts. What did you think I would do when I discovered your betrayal? Quietly step aside so you could play house with your flight attendant? The mention of his frozen accounts seemed to hit Samuel harder than any moral argument. He sank back into his chair, visibly calculating the implications. What do you want, Amara? Money? Is that it? Name your price. The mercenary nature of his question disgusted me. This isn't a negotiation, Samuel. This is the end of our marriage and the beginning of legal proceedings. Bigamy, fraud, misappropriation of funds. These aren't problems you can just throw money at. Think about the children, he pleaded, changing tactics again. Think about the scandal. Do you want everyone knowing their father is a criminal? You should have thought about the children before you abandoned them for your new wife, I replied coldly. Before you gambled away their inheritance on your midlife crisis. Samuel's phone rang, interrupting our confrontation. He glanced at it, his expression shifting from anger to panic. It's Blessing. By all means, answer it, I said, leaning back in my chair. I'd love to hear what you tell her. His hand hovered over the phone, but he didn't pick up. After the fourth ring, it went silent. She'll be worried, I noted, especially when she tries to use her ATM card and discovers your joint account is frozen. As if on cue, his phone lit up with a text message. Samuel read it, his face growing ashen. She says she's at the airport and her card was declined, he whispered. She can't pay for her taxi. How inconvenient, I remarked. Financial problems have a way of exposing the truth, don't they? His phone started ringing again. This time, Samuel answered it, turning away from me as if that might create privacy in the small office. Blessing, darling. Calm down. Yes, there seems to be some issue with the account. No, I don't know what's happening. I'll transfer money to your personal account right away. I cleared my throat loudly. You might want to explain that all your accounts are frozen, Samuel, including the business account you've been using to make those transfers. He shot me a venomous look before returning to his call. Blessing, I need to call you back. No, it's not that I don't care. There's a situation at the office I need to handle first. I promise I'll fix this. When he finally ended the call, Samuel looked defeated. You're destroying everything. No, Samuel. You destroyed everything when you decided to live a lie. I'm merely exposing the truth. He leaned forward, suddenly earnest. Amara, please. We can work something out. I'll end things with Blessing. I'll come home. We can go to counseling, rebuild our marriage. The desperation in his voice might once have moved me, might have activated the caretaker in me that had spent 18 years making excuses for his shortcomings and smoothing over his mistakes. But that woman was gone. It's too late for that, I said, standing to leave. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow to discuss the terms of our divorce and the criminal charges we'll be pursuing. Criminal charges? Samuel looked genuinely frightened now. Amara, you can't be serious. After everything we've been through together, that's exactly why I'm doing this. Because of everything we've been through together. Because you took 18 years of love and commitment and treated it as if it meant nothing. I moved toward the door, but Samuel rushed to block my path. You can't leave like this. We need to talk this through. Move aside, Samuel. Not until you agree to discuss this reasonably. Without lawyers, without courts. I took out my phone. I'm going to call security if you don't let me pass. This is my office, he shouted. You can't call security on me in my own office. Watch me. Something in my tone must have convinced him I was serious. Samuel stepped aside but grabbed my arm as I passed. This isn't over, Amara. You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of. I pulled my arm free and looked him directly in the eyes. That's where you're wrong, Samuel. I know exactly what you're capable of now. That's why I've already taken steps to protect myself and our children from you. As I walked out of his office with my head held high, I could feel the stares of his employees. They had undoubtedly heard the raised voices, perhaps caught fragments of our confrontation. Let them stare. Let them wonder. The truth would come out eventually. In the elevator down to the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from Folake. Are you okay? Do you need me to come in? It's done, I replied. Meeting you at the cafe as planned. When I reached my car, I sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, and finally allowed the tears to come. Not tears of sadness or loss. I had already mourned the death of my marriage in private, but tears of rage and release. The confrontation had gone more or less as I had expected, with Samuel cycling through shock, defensiveness, anger, blame, and finally desperate negotiation. What I hadn't expected was the hollowness I felt now that it was over. I had imagined this moment would bring some sense of closure, of justice being set in motion. Instead, I felt only exhaustion and a gnawing anxiety about what would come next. My phone rang, an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Is this Dr. Amara Okafor? A woman's voice asked. Yes. Who's calling? This is Blessing Adeyemi. I believe we need to talk. Meeting Blessing face to face was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. We had arranged to meet at a quiet restaurant in Ikoyi, far from both our homes and workplaces. I arrived early, selecting a table in the back corner where we wouldn't be easily overheard. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately from the wedding. In person, without the elaborate bridal attire, Blessing looked even younger, barely older than a university student. She was stylish in an expensive-looking dress and designer handbag, her makeup flawless, her movements graceful and confident. She spotted me and approached, her expression a careful mask of neutrality. Dr. Okafor, she said, extending her hand formally. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. I gestured for her to sit. I think we've moved beyond formalities, Blessing. You called yourself my husband's wife on the phone. She flinched slightly, but maintained her composure as she sat down. That's what I believed I was. Believed? Past tense? Blessing's carefully constructed facade cracked slightly. I don't know what to believe anymore. Samuel's accounts are frozen. His phones are now switched off. I went to his office and they told me he hasn't come in today. And then I received documents showing he's already married, to you. What documents? She opened her designer handbag and pulled out copies of our marriage certificate, our children's birth certificates listing Samuel as the father, and recent family photographs. These were delivered to my house this morning by a courier. No sender information. I hadn't sent them. Perhaps one of Samuel's family members had taken it upon themselves to inform Blessing of the truth. So you really didn't know? I asked, studying her reaction carefully. Tears welled in her eyes. How could I have known? He told me he was a widower. He said his wife, you, died during childbirth with your third child. He showed me a grave. My blood ran cold. He showed you my grave? Blessing nodded, wiping away a tear. At Ikoyi Cemetery. A headstone with your name, your birth date, and a death date from 11 years ago. He brought flowers. He cried. The calculated cruelty of this deception left me speechless. Samuel hadn't just lied about being single. He had constructed an elaborate fiction about my death, complete with a fake grave he visited with his girlfriend. The level of sociopathic planning required was astounding. I've been to the cemetery this morning, Blessing continued. The grave is real, but when I asked the administrator about the records, there was no Amara Okafor buried there. The plot was purchased by Samuel 2 years ago, but contains no actual burial. My hands trembled as I reached for my water glass. Did he tell you about our children? He said there were 3 children being raised by his mother in the village. I've been sending money every month to help support them. And $150,000, another lie. Samuel's mother lived in a retirement community in Abuja. Our children had never spent more than a weekend with their grandmother, and certainly had never lived in any village. Our children live with me in Victoria Island, I told her. They attend international schools here in Lagos. They've never lived in any village. Blessing's composure finally broke. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob. Everything was a lie. Everything. Despite all the pain this woman's relationship with my husband had caused me, I couldn't help feeling a twinge of sympathy. She too had been manipulated and deceived, perhaps even more completely than I had been. How did you meet Samuel? I asked once her sobs had subsided. On a flight to Dubai 2 years ago. He was in business class. Very charming, very attentive. He said he was a widower with a successful import-export business, operating in multiple countries. After we landed, he invited me to dinner. Said he hadn't felt this kind of connection with anyone since his wife died. 2 years ago, right around the time Samuel had started changing passwords, working late, and behaving secretively. The timeline aligned perfectly. He courted me like something from a movie. Blessing continued. Expensive gifts, surprise weekend trips, love notes left in my apartment. 6 months in, he proposed. Said he wanted to give his children a mother again. And you believed him? Why wouldn't I? He introduced me to his family. They all confirmed his story about losing his wife. Even showed me old photos of you, saying how tragic it was to lose you so young. I wondered which family members had participated in this deception, and which had been fooled alongside Blessing. Joseph had seemed genuinely shocked at the wedding to see me there. Had he too believed I was dead? What about the house in Lekki? I asked. Samuel bought it for us 6 months ago. Said it was an investment property that could be our matrimonial home. He put it in my name for tax purposes. With money borrowed from his family members under false pretenses and diverted from his business, I informed her. Blessing looked stricken. Are you saying the house isn't legitimately ours? I'm saying Samuel funded that purchase by telling his mother, brother, and sister that his business was failing and he needed loans to save it. He also transferred company funds to personal accounts and offshore holdings. But his business is thriving, Blessing protested weakly. He has offices in 3 countries. He has one legitimate office, the one here in Lagos. The others are mail forwarding addresses and virtual offices. His business is moderately successful, but nothing like what he's obviously portrayed to you. Blessing sat in stunned silence, absorbing these revelations. Finally, she asked the question I had been expecting. What happens now? Legally? Our marriage is valid. Yours isn't. Bigamy is a criminal offense in Nigeria, punishable by imprisonment. And the house? My status? The house will likely be contested as part of the divorce settlement, given that it was purchased with marital assets and funds acquired through deception. As for your status, legally you were never married. Fresh tears flowed down Blessing's cheeks. I resigned from my job last week. Samuel said a wife of his stature shouldn't have to work. He promised to take care of everything. The timing couldn't have been worse for her. Samuel's accounts were frozen, his freedom potentially in jeopardy, and now Blessing had no income of her own. Despite everything, I felt pity for this young woman who had been so thoroughly deceived. She was certainly guilty of not asking enough questions, of being dazzled by wealth and charm, but she hadn't known about me or the children. She hadn't knowingly participated in destroying a family. "What will you do?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "I can try to get my job back. Move in with my sister until I figure things out. But the humiliation—" She trailed off, her expression pained. "Everyone attended our wedding. All my friends, my family. How do I tell them it was all a lie? That I'm not really married? That the man I thought was my husband is a criminal?" The same questions had plagued me over the past 2 weeks. How to tell friends, colleagues, extended family that my seemingly perfect marriage had been a sham. That the respectable deacon from church was actually a bigamist and fraudster. "We've both been victims of Samuel's deception," I said after a moment. "But we don't have to be victims forever. We can choose how we respond to this." Blessing looked up, surprised by my conciliatory tone. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we cooperate rather than fight each other. Samuel wants us at odds. 2 women battling over him and his assets while he potentially escapes with offshore funds we haven't yet traced. Cooperate how? You have information I need about the house, about financial arrangements I may not be aware of. I have legal standing and resources to ensure Samuel faces consequences for his actions. Together, we have a much stronger position than separately." Blessing considered this. "What exactly would I need to do?" "Make a formal statement about how you met Samuel, the representations he made about his marital status, and any financial arrangements you're aware of. Share bank statements, property documents, anything that could help trace the flow of money. Testify if necessary." "And what would I get in return?" "I can't promise the house won't be affected in legal proceedings, but I can commit to ensuring you receive fair compensation for your unwitting role in this situation. My goal isn't to leave you destitute, Blessing. It's to hold Samuel accountable and recover assets for my children's future." She thought for a long moment, then straightened her shoulders. "I'll do it. Not just for any compensation, but because it's the right thing to do. He lied to both of us. He manipulated both of us, and he needs to answer for that." We spent the next hour sharing information, comparing notes on Samuel's deceptions, and developing a strategy. Blessing had access to documents I hadn't seen, including investment prospectuses for business ventures that didn't exist, and property listings for homes across West Africa that Samuel had claimed to own. "He showed me pictures of a villa in Accra," she said, pulling up photos on her phone. "Said we would honeymoon there before moving on to his property in Dakar." I recognized the Accra property immediately. "That's a rental villa. We stayed there as a family 3 years ago for a week. Samuel doesn't own it." By the time our meeting concluded, I had gained a reluctant ally and a clearer picture of the extent of Samuel's deceptions. Blessing and I weren't friends. There was too much painful history between us for that. But we were united in our determination to see justice done. As we prepared to leave, Blessing asked one final question. "Have you told your children yet?" "About any of this?" "Not everything," I admitted. "They know their father has been dishonest, and that we'll be divorcing, but they don't know about the second marriage or the financial crimes." "When will you tell them?" "When I have answers to the questions they'll inevitably ask. When I can explain not just what their father did, but why, and what it means for their future." Blessing nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry for the pain this has caused your family. I truly didn't know." "I believe you," I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Over the next week, Samuel went into hiding. His phones remained off. He didn't return to his office or the house in Lekki, and even his family claimed not to know his whereabouts. But the legal machinery I had set in motion continued to advance. Mrs. Bancole, my lawyer, filed formal divorce proceedings citing bigamy, abandonment, and financial misconduct. She also worked with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, to investigate the offshore accounts and financial irregularities in Samuel's business. Based on the documents you and Ms. Adeyemi provided, We've identified accounts in Dubai, Singapore, and Mauritius containing approximately N75 million, Mrs. Bankole informed me during our weekly update. We've filed for international freezing orders, but these take time. There's a risk Samuel has already accessed these funds. What about the house in Lekki? We've filed a lien against the property, preventing its sale or transfer while the case is ongoing. Ms. Adeyemi has been cooperative, as agreed. Indeed, Blessing had been true to her word, providing statements to both my lawyer and the EFCC investigators. She had returned to Air Nigeria, where her former supervisor had reluctantly rehired her, and moved in temporarily with her sister in Yaba. Meanwhile, I focused on supporting my children through this difficult transition. I had told them a simplified version of the truth. Their father had been dishonest about business matters and had chosen to leave our family. I promised them more details when they were ready, while ensuring they understood that none of this was their fault. Will we ever see Dad again? Kachi, my youngest, asked one evening. I don't know, sweetheart, I answered honestly. That will be up to him, and to the consequences of his actions. Is he in trouble? Neka inquired, always the perceptive one. Yes, he is. Your father made some very bad decisions that have legal consequences. Is he going to jail? This from Chidi, my eldest, who had been the most angry and withdrawn since learning of his father's betrayal. That's possible, I admitted. There will be a court case, and a judge will decide. The children absorbed this information with varying reactions. Kachi with tears, Neka with thoughtful silence, Chidi with barely contained fury at the father who had abandoned them. Whatever happens, I assured them, we will get through this together. We are still a family, and nothing your father has done changes how much I love you or my commitment to your future. 3 weeks after my confrontation with Samuel, the EFCC made a breakthrough. Samuel had been located attempting to cross the border into Benin Republic using a fake passport. He was arrested and brought back to Lagos to face charges of bigamy, fraud, and attempted flight to avoid prosecution. The news made the front pages of several papers. Prominent Lagos businessman arrested for bigamy and fraud. Samuel's double life was now public knowledge, subjecting our family to the very scandal he had claimed to want to avoid. Was called to EFCC headquarters to give a statement and potentially see Samuel for the first time since our confrontation in his office. Mrs. Bankole accompanied me, providing both legal representation and moral support. Remember, she advised as we entered the imposing government building, stick to facts. Emotional outbursts won't help our case, no matter how justified. Samuel was being held in an interview room rather than a cell, a small privilege that probably reflected bribes paid rather than special status. When I entered the room, I barely recognized the man sitting at the table. Just weeks ago, Samuel had been the picture of success, impeccably groomed, confidently holding court at his second wedding, every inch the prosperous businessman. The man before me now was disheveled, unshaven, his designer clothes wrinkled and stained. He had lost weight, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked up as I entered, his expression a complex mixture of shame, resentment, and desperate hope. Amara, he said, half rising before the guard motioned for him to remain seated. Thank you for coming. I'm here because the EFCC requested my statement, I replied evenly. Not out of any concern for your welfare, Samuel's face fell. I understand. But since you're here, how are the children? Don't, I cut him off sharply. Don't pretend to care about them now. You abandoned them, Samuel. You created a new life where they didn't exist. That's not true. I always intended to bring them into my life with blessing. Once everything was settled. Settled? You mean once you had divorced me and legally stolen half of our assets? Once you had established your fake identity as a widower so thoroughly that no one would question it? Samuel looked away, unable to maintain eye contact. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I do love our children. Love isn't just a feeling, Samuel. It's actions, choices, sacrifices. Your actions showed exactly where your priorities were, and they weren't with our children. The EFCC investigator entered then, ending our private conversation. For the next 2 hours, I provided detailed information about our financial history, Samuel's business activities, and the discoveries I had made after learning of his betrayal. Samuel sat in silence throughout my testimony, occasionally shaking his head but not contradicting my statements. The evidence against him was overwhelming, bolstered by Blessing's testimony, bank records, and documents recovered from both his office and the Leckie house. As the session concluded, the investigator informed us that Samuel would remain in custody pending trial. The charges were serious enough that bail was unlikely to be granted, especially given his attempt to flee the country. Before I left, Samuel made one last desperate appeal. "Amara, please. I know I don't deserve mercy, but think of the children. If I go to prison for years, what will that do to them? You should have thought about that before you committed crimes that could separate you from your children," I replied, gathering my documents. "Actions have consequences, Samuel. It's time you faced yours." Walking out of the EFCC headquarters into the bright Lagos sunshine, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a somber recognition that justice, while necessary, couldn't heal all the wounds Samuel had inflicted. "What happens now?" I asked Mrs. Bankole as we walked to her car. "The criminal case will proceed, likely resulting in a conviction given the evidence. Simultaneously, our divorce case will advance, addressing the distribution of assets and custody arrangements." "And the bigamy charge? Given that he actually went through with a second marriage ceremony while still legally married to you, that's the most straightforward charge to prove. The financial crimes may be more complex, but the paper trail is strong." I nodded, trying to focus on the practical aspects rather than the emotional devastation. "What about Blessing? How does this affect her?" "As we discussed, she's a victim in this scenario, not an accomplice. Her cooperation has been valuable to the case. The court will likely take that into consideration when determining what happens with the Leckie property." As we drove back toward Victoria Island, Mrs. Bankole asked a question I hadn't fully considered yet. "What will you do after all this is resolved, Amara? Will you stay in Lagos?" It was a future I needed to contemplate. The scandal would eventually fade, but its effects on my children and my professional reputation might linger. Would it be better to make a fresh start elsewhere, return to my hometown near Enugu, accept one of the international medical positions I had been offered over the years? "I don't know yet," I admitted. "For now, I'm focused on getting through each day, supporting my children, and ensuring Samuel's actions don't destroy our financial security." "A wise approach," Mrs. Bankole nodded. "Just know that whatever you decide, you've handled this nightmare with remarkable strength and dignity. Many women would have collapsed under the weight of such betrayal." Her words reminded me of something my mother had told me shortly after I informed her of Samuel's deception. "This tragedy has revealed not just his character, but yours as well. And yours, my daughter, is made of much stronger stuff than his." As I returned home to my children that evening, I held that thought close. Whatever came next, the trial, the divorce, the rebuilding of our lives, we would face it with the strength and dignity that Samuel had so thoroughly abandoned. The trial of Samuel Okafor became one of the most publicized cases in Lagos that year. The combination of bigamy, financial fraud, and the social status of those involved made it irresistible to the media. For weeks, our family's tragedy was dissected in newspapers, on radio programs, and in social media posts. I did my best to shield my children from the worst of it, but it was impossible to completely protect them from the whispers at school, the pitying glances from neighbors, and the occasional tactless questions from acquaintances. "Is it true your father had a second family?" Neka was asked by a classmate. "Did your dad really steal millions?" Someone asked Chidi at football practice. Each incident left new wounds that I struggled to heal with reassurances and honest, age-appropriate explanations. "People will talk," I told them, "but they don't know our whole story. We know the truth, and we know that none of this reflects on you or your worth." 4 months after Samuel's arrest, the criminal trial concluded with a decisive verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, delivered a scathing assessment of Samuel's actions before announcing his sentence. "Mr. Okafor, you have betrayed not only the trust of your family, but also the laws of this nation. Your actions demonstrate a calculated pattern of deception spanning years, affecting dozens of victims. The court sentences you to 7 years imprisonment for bigamy, and an additional 5 years for the financial crimes to be served concurrently. Additionally, You are ordered to make restitution to all parties financially harmed by your actions. I sat in the courtroom as the sentence was pronounced, feeling neither joy nor sorrow, only a sense that a chapter was closing. Samuel, standing in the dock, seemed to have aged a decade in the months since his arrest. He looked briefly in my direction as he was led away, but I couldn't read his expression. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for my reaction. "Dr. Okafor, how do you feel about the verdict? Are you satisfied with your husband's sentence? What happens to your family now?" Mrs. Bankhole fielded most questions, providing brief professional responses while shepherding me toward our waiting car. But before I entered the vehicle, I decided to make one statement. Justice has been served through the legal system, but no verdict can undo the damage to our family. My focus now is on healing and rebuilding a secure future for my children. I ask for privacy as we move forward. The civil proceedings, our divorce and the distribution of assets, took longer to resolve, but the criminal conviction strengthened my position considerably. The court granted me full custody of the children, with Samuel allowed only supervised visitation after his release. All marital assets in Nigeria were awarded to me and the children, with Samuel's offshore accounts to be repatriated and divided according to a court-approved formula once they were fully traced. The house in Lekki presented a particular challenge, given Blessing's involvement. After lengthy negotiations, we reached a settlement. The property would be sold, with 60% of the proceeds going to my children's education fund and 40% to Blessing as compensation for her unwitting role in Samuel's schemes. Throughout this process, Blessing continued to cooperate, testifying when needed and providing additional documentation as it was discovered. We maintained a cordial if somewhat distant relationship, bound by our shared experience as victims of Samuel's manipulation. 1. Year after Samuel's wedding to Blessing, the event that had sparked the unraveling of his double life, I sat in my home office reviewing the final divorce decree. It was done. Legally, financially, and emotionally, my marriage to Samuel Okafor was over. The journey had been painful beyond imagining, but it had also been transformative. I had discovered reserves of strength I hadn't known I possessed. I had protected my children and secured their future. I had maintained my professional standing at the hospital despite the scandal, and I had learned profound lessons about trust, resilience, and the importance of truth. My phone rang, Fulake, checking in as she did almost daily. "It's official," I told her. "The divorce is finalized. How do you feel?" she asked. Relieved, sad, stronger, all of it at once. "And the children?" "Taking it day by day. Chidi's anger is slowly subsiding. Nika's asking more questions about relationships and trust, trying to make sense of it all. Kachi still cries sometimes, but less often. And you? What's next for Dr. Amara Okafor?" It was a question I had been pondering for months. The scandal had begun to fade from public interest, replaced by newer controversies and scandals. My practice at the hospital had actually grown, with many patients, particularly women, specifically requesting me after hearing my story through the media. "I've been offered a position heading a new pediatric center," I told Folake. "Here in Lagos, but on the mainland, away from all the memories in Victoria Island. Are you going to take it?" "I think so. It's a fresh start without running away. The children can stay in their schools, keep their friends, but we'll have a new home, new routines." "I'm proud of you, Amara," Folek said warmly. Not everyone would have handled this with such grace and determination. After we hung up, I walked through the house that had once been filled with what I thought was marital happiness. So many memories within these walls, birthdays, anniversaries, quiet evenings, family meals. For a long time, these memories had been tainted by the knowledge of Samuel's betrayal, as if his deception had retroactively poisoned even the genuine moments of connection. But now, with the legal proceedings concluded and the path forward clear, I could begin to separate the true from the false. Our marriage had not been a complete lie. There had been love, particularly in the early years. There had been genuine joy in the birth and raising of our children. Those memories belonged to me and my children, not to Samuel's deception. 2 weeks later, I stood with my children in our new home, a comfortable but more modest house in Surulere, closer to the pediatric center I would now be leading. The movers had just finished unloading the last of our possessions. carefully selected to represent our future rather than our past. It's smaller than our old house, Kachi observed, exploring the rooms. Yes, but it's ours, I told him. Completely ours, with no debt, no lies, no shadows. Neka ran her hand along the freshly painted walls. Can I decorate my room however I want? Absolutely. This is a fresh start for all of us. Chidi, still struggling with his feelings about his father, stood in the doorway of his new room, his expression unreadable. What do you think, Chidi? I asked gently. It's fine, he said with a shrug, then added unexpectedly, it feels cleaner somehow, like we're not living in a fake life anymore. His words struck me deeply. Yes, that was exactly it. We were no longer living in the elaborate fiction Samuel had constructed. We were living our authentic lives, messy, challenging, sometimes painful, but real. That evening, after the children were asleep, I sat on the small balcony of our new home, looking out at the lights of Lagos. My phone buzzed with a text message from Blessing. The house sold today. Lawyer says funds will be transferred next week. Thank you for being fair when you could have been vengeful. Wishing healing for you and your children. I smiled slightly. Blessing, too, was rebuilding her life. She had been reinstated at Air Nigeria and was pursuing a degree in aviation management. Like me, she had chosen to remain in Lagos, facing down the whispers and stares rather than running from them. My mother joined me on the balcony, having come to stay with us during the move. At 70, she remained a formidable woman whose wisdom had been my anchor throughout this ordeal. What are you thinking about, my daughter? She asked, settling into the chair beside me. About endings and beginnings, I replied. About how sometimes the path you thought was your destiny turns out to be just a detour. And where does your path lead now? I considered her question, looking out at the city lights. Forward, I said finally. Not defined by Samuel or his betrayal, not defined by being a victim or a survivor. Just forward, creating something new for myself and the children. You've done well, Amara, my mother said, patting my hand. When life broke everything around you, you didn't break. You rebuilt. That's the legacy you're giving your children. Not the scandal, but the strength. 6 months later, the pediatric center I directed was flourishing, providing care to children from all backgrounds. My professional reputation had not only recovered from the scandal, but had been enhanced by how I had handled adversity. I had established a support group for women who had experienced similar betrayals, creating a safe space where they could share their stories and healing journeys. Several times a month, I spoke at women's events about financial literacy and the importance of maintaining independence even within marriage. My children were adjusting well to our new life. Chidi had joined a competitive football team and was excelling academically. Neka had discovered a passion for art therapy, creating powerful pieces that helped her process her feelings about her father. Kachi, the most resilient of the three, had made new friends in the neighborhood and seemed to take each day as it came. Samuel remained in prison, his appeals exhausted. He sent letters to the children occasionally, letters I reviewed carefully before deciding whether to share them. Some were manipulative or self-pitying. These I set aside. Others showed genuine remorse and concern for their well-being. These I passed along, allowing my children to maintain a connection with their father on their own terms. Blessing and I maintained our unexpected alliance, meeting occasionally for coffee to update each other on legal matters and our progress in rebuilding our lives. We weren't friends exactly, but we shared a unique bond forged in the crucible of Samuel's deception. I've started dating again, she told me during one such meeting, very cautiously. I check everything he tells me. Trust doesn't come easily after what we experienced, I acknowledged. What about you? Are you seeing anyone? I shook my head. Not yet. I'm focusing on the children and my career. Maybe someday, but I'm in no hurry. The truth was, I wasn't sure I would ever fully trust a romantic partner again. But I had learned that there were many kinds of love in this world. The love for my children, the support of friends like Folake, the wisdom of my mother, the solidarity of women who had walked similar paths. These loves sustained me, filled my life with meaning and purpose. One evening, as I helped Neka with a school project about family, she asked a question that caught me off guard. Mom, do you regret marrying Dad? I considered carefully before answering. No, I don't. If I hadn't married your father, I wouldn't have you three. And you are the greatest gifts of my life. But he hurt you so much, she persisted. Yes, he did. But life isn't about avoiding pain, Nneka. It's about what you do with the pain when it comes. Sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest sources of strength and wisdom. My daughter studied my face, her eyes wise beyond her years. You're different now, stronger. We all are, I told her, hugging her close. That's what happens when you face the truth, no matter how painful. You become who you're truly meant to be. 2 years after discovering Samuel at another woman's wedding, I stood at the podium of a women's conference in Abuja, addressing hundreds of attentive faces. I had been invited to share my story as part of a panel on resilience and reinvention. When I found my husband marrying another woman, I thought my world had ended. I began. Everything I believed about my marriage, my family, my future shattered in an instant. I stood at the back of that church feeling invisible, erased from my own life story. The audience was silent, many nodding in recognition of that devastating feeling of betrayal. But what I didn't realize then was that this moment wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One where I reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my future. I shared the painful details of my journey, the shock, the investigation, the legal battles, the public humiliation. But more importantly, I shared the transformation that had emerged from that crucible of pain. Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as a woman who discovered her own strength, a woman who rebuilt her life on a foundation of truth rather than illusion, a woman who learned that sometimes losing what you thought you had opens the door to finding what you truly deserve. After my speech, women lined up to speak with me, many with tears in their eyes as they shared their own stories of betrayal, recovery, and rebirth. Some were just beginning their journeys. Others were years into their healing process. All of them reinforced what I had come to believe, that in sharing our stories, we create bridges of understanding and strength for each other. That evening, as I prepared to return to Lagos, I received a letter forwarded by Mrs. Bankole. It was from Samuel, but unlike his previous correspondence, this one was addressed to me rather than the children. For a long moment, I considered throwing it away unopened. What could he possibly say that would matter now? But curiosity won out, and I carefully opened the envelope. Amara, he had written, I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. But after 2 years of reflection, I need to acknowledge the truth, not just to the court or my conscience, but to you, the woman I betrayed so completely. The letter continued with a detailed confession, not just of his actions, which I already knew, but of the mindset that had led him down that destructive path. The insecurity that had festered beneath his confident exterior, the addiction to admiration that had made Blessing's youthful adoration so intoxicating, the financial pressures he had created through his own greed and materialism. None of this excuses what I did, he wrote toward the end. Nothing could, but perhaps it might help you understand that the failure was entirely mine. A weakness of character, a fundamental moral failing that had nothing to do with you or your worth. You were always more than I deserved, and I was too blind to see it. The letter ended simply, You have built something beautiful from the ruins of what I destroyed. It is the only consolation in my darkest hours, knowing that you and our children are thriving despite my betrayal. Continue to shine, Amara. You always were the strongest of us all. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in its envelope. Samuel's words didn't change the past or erase the pain he had caused. They didn't undo the damage to our children or restore the years of deception. But they were, perhaps, a small measure of the justice I had sought, an acknowledgement of the truth, freely given rather than extracted through investigation and legal proceedings. That night, in my hotel room overlooking the lights of Abuja, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here, from the shock of seeing my husband at another woman's wedding, to the painstaking investigation that had uncovered his double life, from the confrontation in his office to the courtroom where justice was finally served, from the broken pieces of a shattered marriage to the strength and wisdom I now carried within me. Life had not gone according to plan. Far from it. But standing here now, I realized that perhaps the greatest gift of Samuel's betrayal had been freedom. Freedom from illusion. Freedom from a marriage built on deception. Freedom to discover who I truly was when everything I thought I knew was stripped away. I was Amara Okafor, mother, doctor, survivor. And my story was still being written. One day, one choice, one moment of truth at a time. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Remember that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to rewrite our stories and create new beginnings. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know what part of my journey spoke to you most deeply. Until next time, this is Amara, signing off and moving forward. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more powerful true stories of survival and triumph.